Hello, everyone. Good evening. It's my absolute delight and pleasure that's weird, to welcome you here this evening to the third edition of the London Design Biennale. And I have to say, there have been many times in the last 15 months when I thought I'd never get to say those lines. So, the Biennale is an exhibition that shows the power of design, the contribution it makes to the way we live, and the way we might live together in the future. Bringing the international design community together to do this is essential, and designers know this. 33 countries, nations, territories, and states have moved mountains to be here and around us today. Their ideas fill nearly every indoor and outdoor space that Somerset House has to offer in an amazing show from all corners of the earth about what is on people's minds now. At London Design Biennale, we believe that this design thinking needs a borderless arena, offering a global view to anyone who visits. Politics are put aside as designers take the time and the space to meet, share concerns, opinions, ideas, and sometimes solutions. The great tradition of the Global Expo, which of course started here in London with the Great Exhibition, has an important role to play. And the power of design to tell stories is self-evident as we stand here in this wonderful forest. We sit here this evening in this incredible centrepiece of our global exhibition, The Forest for Change. With over 400 trees, the forest is designed by the world-renowned artist and designer, Es Devlin, here on my left, here with us this evening. Woo! And at its centre is the story of the UN Global Goals, a plan for us all to live better and better the world by 2030. I look forward very much. I hope you will all come back and see the whole Biennale, please. We're here until the 27th of June, and I look forward to welcoming you here. But to extend the story on storytelling, I'm delighted to hand to Tina to start our first panel discussion for London Design Biennale 2021.
Thank you
very much.
And welcome to Forest for Change and the safe reopening of London. If you haven't had a chance to explore the forest, it's an installation created to raise awareness of the global goals, a plan adopted by all UN member states in 2015 to end poverty, fight inequality and tackle climate change by 2030. The goals are a bold plan for planet and people, signed up to by every country for everyone. As the COVID pandemic threatens to roll back decades of progress, the goals must be our collective to-do list, and we must act together to achieve them. So here we are at the heart of this forest of 400 trees, which were brought to Somerset House, a place where trees were forbidden when it was first built 250 years ago, to reflect on the attitude of human dominance over nature. We are also, it's a bit Stonehenge-like, surrounded by 17 mirrored pillars, which bring the goals to life through inspiring quotes and facts. My personal favourite is Goal 17. As visitors come to the end of their journey through this installation, at the 17th pillar, they're asked to share the change they want to see in the world. Once they've recorded their message, it will become part of Voices for Change. Now that is a project bringing together the voices and passions of people all over the world in support of the global goals. Today, surrounded by all of these innovative approaches to making change and raising awareness, we want to discuss how art, culture and design can support the ambition of these goals, and about the transformative impact of creativity on society, on cities and global progress. And to help do that are our panellists. Sadiq Khan, Mayor of London, international artist. International artist Es Devlin, who is the Forest for Change designer and artistic director of London Design Biennale. Archibong, designer of the pavilion of the African Diaspora. And writer, director, co-founder of Red Nose Day and UN Sustainable Development Goals advocate Richard Curtis. Please give them all a warm welcome. Now, Ez, when this place was built, there was one strict instruction: no trees. You broke that rule. How does that feel?
Well, Jonathan Reiki over there is the artistic director of Somerset House, and he's looking a bit sheepish because this is all his fault. What happened was 2 years ago, on the 23rd of June, we were launching the London Design Biennale, which Sir John Sorrell and Ben Evans had very kindly asked myself and Vicky to preside over. John and Jonathan took me on the tour and said, you can do this in this room, you can have all these spaces, you can go down here, you can go up here, you can do anything you want in this courtyard. The only thing you mustn't do is put any trees in there. And I have to say, this was 2 years ago, and trees didn't mean quite the same thing to me, I guess, as they do now. The world hadn't changed in the way that it now has. And I think rather flippantly said, oh, we'll put a forest there then. But I think the reason I really thought about doing that was because I had struggled with this space being animated by things. When I've seen this space really come alive, it's when it's full of people. When it's full of the ice skating rink, or when it's full of the films, or when it's full of the pop concerts. And whenever I've seen things here, it's difficult because the space is so huge for things. And I just thought, well, what if we animate it with non-human beings? Trees. So that's where it started.
And that's what you've done. You have been designing iconic experiences that bring important messages to life for years now. Why was it important for you to engage with the Biennale, the Global Goals, and bringing this Forest for Change here at this particular moment in time?
Well, I keep talking, I've been saying this a few times today, so forgive me if you've already heard me say it, but this word designer, I think it's become a bit of a problematic word. Because we say designer handbags, and we say designer shoes, and we say designer hotels. And designer sort of just come to mean kind of cool or good. But actually everything's designed. You know, sewage systems are designed, and tax systems are designed, and weapons are designed. Everything's designed. So we need to take responsibility as designers for every single part of this network that we've woven around the planet. And I think the most important thing that all the designers who've made these 38 exhibitions that I hope you'll come and have a look at, have brought is an attitude towards parameters, right? As designers, you're set with parameters, and you're told, you have this much space, you have this much time, you have this much money. But what we're not told is the Earth's parameter. We don't have that set for us at the moment, right? We're still making things as if there's an infinite, and of course we know that there's not. So I think as designers, we've slightly been waiting for someone on high to say to us, you've only got this much carbon, or you've only got this much of Earth's resources. But I think we've learned we have to impose that on ourselves now.
And you've touched on it already, but do you think visitors will have a different appreciation of this as they might have done pre-pandemic?
Well, I think so. I think massively so. And I think, you know, Rich and I had been talking for some time about these sustainable development goals are actually a really manageable way to look at the problem. Look at us, we're sitting here. If you read each of these phrases, it's an incredibly complex range of problems that are suddenly made almost sort of childlike accessible. And it's so overwhelming to think about these things. And I think that what you're doing is making us feel less afraid, less daunted.
One of the things I've always loved about them is, one of the things I'm afraid of is when I'm focusing on one thing, is the person who's focusing on the other thing my enemy? Do you know what I mean? I'm trying to deal with hunger and poverty and the climate people, as it were, attracting attention away from the things I care about. And the thing about the goals is they absolutely show how everything is linked and how you're all on the same side. They form a sort of circle of achievement and show how interrelated they are. So I think they calm you in order to focus on the things you're passionate about while knowing that you're serving, you know, the whole.
Yeah, and Richard, what message do you hope visitors will leave the Forest of Change when they come here, knowing about the global goals and their part in achieving them, what they could be doing?
Well, I hope they'll think the goals are great, very simply. You know, there's really gorgeous stuff written on each of them. So in a way, you just want to light a fire under people. Many things in my life, you know, have been inspired by one moment, is where my whole life has been inspired by Live Aid. I hadn't done anything for anyone until, as it were, that thing happened. I think, you know, you have to make things happen. So I hope that people will see this, read that, be inspired or touched by something. I was looking at clean water, and the quote from W.H. Auden there is, 1,000 people have lived without love, but no one's lived without water. Which shows I should have been writing films about water rather than about love. There's still time. But yeah, I just hope it's like a poster for the goals. It's something just to inspire you to think about. The next time you see them, you'll look into them. You can pick out one and say, because one of the things I love about the goals is when you argue with your government about something, The truth is they promised in 2015 to deal with it. They've actually got the solutions. It's just that they're not prioritizing it. The quote from Greta Thunberg on climate action is, the climate crisis is already solved. We actually know what to do. We just have to do it. So I just hope that people will feel as though they own them. They think they look and feel something they want to belong to, and then just take it forward in their lives.
Innie, what were your impressions of where we are, the Forest for Change?
To be honest, my first impression was appreciation. I live around trees. I live in Switzerland, so for me, daily life involves interacting with trees, communicating with trees, and receiving inspiration from trees. And one of the reasons that I don't choose to live in the city is because of the city's kind of, goal to dominate nature in order to exist for commerce, right? So, exactly what Ez has said, that resonates with me, that, she would come in and say, well, this is, the clear kind of expression of that ideal, and we're going to say that from now into the future, we're no longer going to adhere to something that's antiquated and no longer relevant. And I think that applies to most of the things that we're seeing and considering to be social issues right now.
And can you tell us a bit more about your pavilion here and how it uses design and creativity to talk about a similarly important issue?
Yeah. Well, I think with my pavilion, I think what I've done is I've just used design and abstraction to create a space where other people can address the issue. I'm very clear about my contribution to my people and to this planet and to all of humanity. I was born with the skills that make me good at drawing things and creating dreamlike spaces. So I don't necessarily even see the pavilion as much more than a platform, I would say. So I think, like any monument, the pavilion is like a temporary monument where it encapsulates an idea that is more than what that monument is. It reaches to the past and hopefully to the future and can inspire people.
How, when and why did you conceive the idea?
It's actually a funny story.
Please share.
So as when she became the creative director, contacted me, and we've been friends for a while. And I was actually working on a project that brought me into London, so I came to hang out. And when she presented the opportunity to me, I had to be honest with myself and with Ez that the life that I lived and the current situation of the world didn't put me in a position where I felt like I could responsibly represent any country. There was at the time especially a lot of nationalism that I felt like was becoming detrimental to humanity as a whole. And when you look at that nationalism, and I reflected on the life that I'd lived, one of the things that I guess kept me from having that type of nationalism was the fact that I was part of a larger community that wasn't based on a flag. So actually quite quickly, and as reminded me, I kind of jumped up on her kitchen counter without permission.
Dominated the space.
And told her about this idea of a conch shell. And whenever an idea hits me so quickly and so powerfully, I know it's really important. And the journey from sitting on Ez's counter to actually having the pavilion here wasn't easy. And even at the point where I'd given up completely on it because of the fact that we don't have a country supporting us, we don't have implicit funding, it was still a strong enough concept that it wouldn't allow itself to die, right? So even the way that it came about was really just me sending another email to Ez as soon as I found out that it was postponed and saying, hey, I'm working on a project with a new business partner, and I think that I might be able to actually turn this into more than just an idea. And yeah, it
Here it is.
happened. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Sadiq, how integral, bringing things back to London, will the arts, culture and events like the Biennale be to reopening London, to re-establishing it as a safe global creative hub and refocusing communities on issues within the global goals that may have taken a back seat over the past year?
Well, first, can I say, isn't it wonderful to be out and about with people? Surrounded by creativity. Can I just apologise? I feel like a fraud with all this creative talent on these stalls, but I'm pleased my feet reach the floor, which doesn't always happen when I'm given stalls to sit on. Look, listen, I'm quite clear. I mean, we've got this big campaign, the biggest domestic tourism campaign our city's ever seen. It's called Let's Do London. And we're spending millions of pounds to encourage Londoners back into the West End, but also people across the country into London, and culture's where it's at. It's in the DNA of our city. I've got a phrase which is, and Justine helped me write this, which is, you know, good culture reflects society, great culture shapes it. Richard, you can have that for nothing for the next one. But it's important, Tina, because, you know, one of our USPs is our diversity, and just hearing some of your stories about how you conceive of art, that's what London's about. We don't simply tolerate difference, we embrace it, we celebrate it, we respect it, and we love culture. There's a self-interest. 1 out of 5 jobs in London are in retail, culture, or hospitality. So there's a self-interest to protect those jobs. But just think about how, genuinely, how great you're feeling being out and about, being surrounded by nature, by creativity, and you've not even been inside yet. So just imagine when you walk around, and that's the joy of culture. It's intrinsic, and after the 15 months we've had, we want to feel good. We want to feel lifted, and as Richard's semi-retired, the only way you're going to get it is by enjoying the culture of our city.
Are you semi-retired?
I hadn't noticed.
Well, I said to Richard, can I be in your next film? He said, I'm semi-retired.
Oh, right.
Do you know, I retired the moment he asked me whether or not he could be in the next film. It seemed like a good moment.
Moving swiftly on in that case. These next few questions are open to all of you, and there's 2 parts to this next question. What impact can creativity have on raising awareness of the global goals and society's greatest challenges? And the second part is, how can design be part of altering our behaviours to create transformative impact for those challenges? Ez.
Oh, the second part I can speak to. Well, there's a wonderful phrase that I've nicked from Timothy Morton, eco-philosopher, who says, don't try to teach people or educate people into shifting their perspective, amaze them into changing their minds. And I do think if you can reach people, as we try to in theatre, via their emotions, then you might just sort of go through a little chink in the armour of what they think they believe, and you might just access something that they didn't even know they could feel. And I think changing people's minds is what we need to be in the business of, because as a whole society, as a whole species, you know, we have managed in the past to change our minds. We did do it. We used to think things that we now don't think. We used to have attitudes that we now don't have. We've managed it. We used to think the earth was flat, and now most of us don't.
Some people still do.
There were lots of things we used to believe that we now don't. So that kind of shift is enormous, and we need to do it faster than evolution would normally allow us. So I think amazement is the way forward.
I mean, I really think that design is so absolutely key here. And I think designers are rising to the challenge. I remember like 10 years ago going to the Design Museum and taking photographs of the 2 things that I thought related to comic relief. And all the rest were, as it were, fashion and flair. And then I went 3 years ago, and 40 out of the 50 were about sustainability. You know, the pride thing through the Burberry coat, the design of the lionesses things. So many stuff were about sustainability. And we're on the edge of a consumer revolution where so many, particularly young people, are making choices because they believe that the product is for the good of the planet. So it's like an absolutely key moment, I think, for designers and indeed businesses to say, we're going to make it self-evident that by purchasing this thing and engaging with this thing, you're actually going to do it for the benefit of the planet. You know, I think that it's completely, design is going to be completely key to popularizing and almost changing the direction of the way capitalism works.
Any your thoughts?
Yeah, I think coming off of what the two of them just said, it's the thing that comes to mind is that I've always looked at design as a medium, right? It's like it's the palette that I paint with as a creative. So the fact that design has always kind of been assumed to be attached to commerce, I think that that's what's changing. So what we're seeing is that if I use my skills as a designer to create something to inspire and touch people's souls, right, then there's kind of there's an implied false sense of understanding of what a designer and a design object is that can be disrupted when it comes with a concept that is amazing, right? And in that sense, I think as a designer, those of us that do think beyond just how to use those skills to create objects and create things, that we can have an effect on people's psyche and thereby, people's mentality and how we move forward as a society.
Sadiq, how do movements that use creativity to share their message, so Black Lives Matter, Choose Love, or Fridays for Future, work to affect change both regionally and nationally?
Yeah, I think as in answer to a first question, talked about some of the negative connotations with design, but actually designers by definition are innovators, they're creatives, and I think when you twin that with progressive values, you see what you've got around you. I mean, Richard and I were talking about actually a lot of the sustainable goals are written not in plain English and they're not written in poetry, but you twin those progressive values with creatives and designers, and you've got the opportunity to change people's minds, to paraphrase Richard, to inspire people, to amaze people to change the way they behave. And I think these sustainable goals, they're really sensible things we can do to save our planet and to reduce inequality and so forth. And what Ez is trying to do, I hope, with Richard and others, is to make them accessible to those who aren't converted to join the party, to join the movement. We've seen how design can be used negatively, make America great again, and so forth, take back control, and so forth. But I think those of us who are progressives need to work with innovators, designers, those who are great thinkers, about making sure our progressive values reach those who haven't yet been converted to the cause. And this is fantastic. You're going to have, in the heart of the greatest city in the world, fantastic diversity, but bringing to life language written in the UN, not the most accessible place in the world, to ordinary Londoners and those who visit our city this summer. So it's really exciting.
And can I just say, we've got Josie here, for instance. Now, she started help. She started to help refugees, and the artistic leap of making the motto of that, Choose Love, completely rephrases the whole issue. It's not a political problem. It becomes a kind of simple human issue. And that's one of those moments that absolutely radically changes people's attitude to the whole thing. So the entire generation that might have thought, well, is this a question of statistics? Is this a question of politics? Is this a problem? Think, oh no, it's actually a really simple, decent human thing. And that's just, as it were, two beautifully chosen words. And I do think that people can, that design and creativity can absolutely alter politics and our attitudes to things.
Oh, and also make poverty history, Richard, which wasn't bad.
Yeah, good one.
That was Curtis, not Josie.
Well, we're going to come to you, Josie, in a second. I just want to say we would love more than anything to hear your questions and comments on what we've been hearing so far. Because of COVID rules, we can't pass microphones around, so please do speak up from your seat instead. And to kick things off, we'll go to you, Josie.
I just wanted to say this is like the most incredible example of creativity being used for campaigning, and I just walking around and smelling the smell, that's just amazing, and congratulations, that's stunning. My question actually kind of got answered. I wanted to say that as a campaigning organisation, we're struggling actually to reach outside of our own echo chamber in the traditional way that we do campaigning, and how can we use creativity and design more as organisations to reach outside our own our echo chamber. So I don't know if, any advice for us to kind of change the way that we're thinking, because I feel like a lot of our old tricks have run out.
I mean, firstly, I think that isn't true, because I think your choice of language, as everyone's just said, is so inspired that I think that will reach, beyond. But I do think if you can work with artists who want to make work because of a series of events in their life or whatever their path has led them to want to make a piece of work. And if they happen to have interests that then overlap with the purpose of the charity and the campaign and the movement, then finding that moment of intersection so it doesn't feel forced, that will be the thing that does it. So it doesn't feel like education, it feels like a piece of art because that person has, their whole story is led towards it. That's where I think the strongest things are made.
Amy, you're nodding. Anything to add?
I was just agreeing.
Okay. That's fine. You can just agree.
I did have something to add actually to the question before, though. I think it's interesting that, you know, it's great that we're celebrating the fact that artists and designers are creating the opportunity for people to reevaluate some of the values that they hold dear and think of a more progressive and, you know, beneficial, unifying way to approach things. But I think it's important that we don't miss the fact that it requires us to do these things in order for people to acknowledge certain basic things, right? It shouldn't take like a catchy slogan and a really great logo from an organization like Black Lives Matter for people to realize that my life matters. So I think it's great that we celebrate what we're doing and we're here to do that. But I also think it's important that we question the fact that we even need to.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
And can I say something about the goals? I mean, I think it's been an astonishing year because we should all have been thinking only about COVID. And yet this year, in terms of Fridays for the Future, Black Lives Matter, Me Too movement, it's strange that, as it were, under duress, people's emotions have turned to the absolutely key underlying social injustices. And I think that's why this is particularly well timed, because, you know, the great miracle of UK culture was that after World War II, the first thing we did was vote in a Labour government and establish the NHS, you know, and this is the moment to actually say you can address everyone's been taken down, you can actually restart society by bringing, you know, everyone up equally.
Thank you. Questions? Yeah. Hey.
Hi, thank you very much. Really enjoyed the panel. My question's to Sadiq. You've obviously been mayor for a number of years now. Do you have any regrets on the global goals, ones perhaps you didn't prioritise? And are there any going forward that you're going to really champion as mayor of London?
I was speaking to Richard and Ez earlier on, and I reminded them of a quote that I like from a former mayor in America. And he said if the 19th century is famous for century of empires, 20th century nation states, the 21st century is about cities and mayors. And I think actually if we're going to reach these goals by 2030, it's cities and mayors is where the action is, particularly because of urbanisation, meaning more and more people are moving to cities. And so I think we've got a leading role to play. We've got to accelerate the progress. I mean, the regret is that we've got a horrible government and we can't do more. But that's where design, creativity, and you can't comment as a BBC journalist, of course. And for those journalists here, the BBC journalist didn't comment or smile or anything. We're going to keep her job. We like her on the morning show, BBC Two. And so we've got to realise that in those parts of the world where, you know, there aren't progressives running the show, we've got an opportunity to affect public opinion. And don't underestimate the ability of civic society, individuals, campaigners to affect change. But also, one of the things we can do is build networks. And so the great news is there's a number of mayors across the globe, not just across the UK, across Europe, across the globe, and we work closely together. And we're impatient for change. And over the last 4 years in the USA, some of the American mayors were leading at the front, even when there was, you know, a president who was not progressive. And I think in our country over the next few years, it's foreseeable we'll have a government that isn't progressive. So we've got to redouble our efforts in relation to building coalitions. And just to say, to Josie's question, I think Josie's been a bit humble here because she's managed in the last few years, Richard's right, to change opinions, because who could be against choosing love? Who could be against helping the asylum seeker, the refugee, the person who needs legal advice and so forth? And so I genuinely believe in the decency of people, and so we've got to make sure that we're upbeat, optimistic and hopeful.
That's really interesting, because one of your first trips was to a mayor, I can't remember where it was, but recently, right, you went somewhere to a coalition, so I do like the
Yeah, it's all about building bridges, not walls.
I mean, we do have to be, I understand where you're coming from, but we really have to hope for COP. We really have to hope that the government actually sees that there is national fighting, but absolute need for an extraordinary global effort and global leadership on that issue. You know, and I, as it were, sit here as a citizen of the world, expecting the government to do extraordinary things on vaccines at the G7 and expecting them to do extraordinary things at COP. And I think all of us, you know, I think are aware this is a really important 6 months for the planet. And we have to do everything we can in the UK to use our leadership to lead on that issue, because time is running out. We've just lost another year.
More questions? I'll go to the back and I'll come to you.
What happens to the trees after the exhibition?
Good question.
Good question. The first thing I asked Es.
We have been asked this question now, I think, for about a year. I've probably had about 100 people asking me, and we talked long and hard. And actually, Ben Evans, I don't know where you are, Ben, and Ben and I had a big fight, because obviously we all want them to go to our borough, but that half of them are going to the borough of Sadiq, an urban reforestation project, and the other half are going to the borough of Islington, and then the shrubs are all going to a children's hospice, some very ill children. The people who put the forest together are two extraordinary people called Phil and Angus, Phil Jaffa and Angus Cunningham. They work regularly with a company called Green Fingers, whose whole mission is to take plants from events like this and give them homes in places like this hospice in Essex. So.
That deserves a round of applause, surely.
I think that people have really woken up to a lot of the global goals, especially, I guess, climate control has been on everyone's minds, because now they feel like they can't go on holidays, or they can see the park not looking as pretty as it used to be. So when people act, when they see things in front of them, I can obviously speak on behalf of Africans when I say, you know, I'm sitting here and I'm looking at no poverty and zero hunger, which I know affects naturally my people and people of colour. How do you think we get people to care about things that they can't see directly in front of them? You know, we'll watch a Netflix documentary and we'll be like, oh, that was bad, oh, I feel really bad, and then you walk away from it. You're never really going to see the poverty or hunger that you'll see in an African or, you know, Indian country, for instance. How do you think we tackle people wanting to help in countries that don't affect them?
How do you build empathy?
Well, look, I mean, that is a complex issue. My experience, you know, at Comic Relief, is that there is massive empathy the moment you open the doors, make things, you know, easy and interesting for people. I think one of the things that COVID has done also has given us a sense of shared experience, and I hope that the world is going to, you know, actually pay some attention to that. I mean, the vaccines question is so extraordinary. It is absolutely everybody knows that none of us are safe anywhere unless all of us are safe everywhere. It's incredibly clear. And so, you know, it's you just hope that the world will, we've been through a bad time in terms of them and us, but begin to see that, you know, financial success and health and all these things are the only ways of ensuring, you know, our future as well as other people's future. But it is a tough thing, and I think it is often up to, you know, artists, as it were. You know, my son's favourite engagement with Africa is certainly not watching Comic Relief. You know, it's listening to Burna Boy. It's actually experiencing artistic input from people from that continent. So I think one of the ways is also to encourage all sorts of cultural exchange, so that you do understand that the people in other countries are so like you, so interesting, more interesting, and then you've got perhaps more time to say, and, you know, these basic things should not be, you know, fucking up their lives.
I think there's a wonderful quote, actually, George Monbiot said when he was, you know, taking some heat for having sided with Extinction Rebellion. I think he got arrested. And he said, I'd rather be, people are calling him a hypocrite because he gets on planes, whatever he does. And he said, I'd rather be a hypocrite than a cynic. And I think for many of us, we don't really have an option to be too many other things. It's, do you want to be a hypocrite or do you want to be a cynic? And I think that's often the first barrier to entry is, oh, well, if I do that, but I'm not doing that. And I think often people who are well known feel embarrassed about coming out and siding with the subjects. Oh, well, they'll say that I get on planes. Oh, well, they'll say that I've got a big house or whatever. So it's a case of just, like George Monbiot, owning that hypocrisy piece and saying, right, I've said it, but I'm still going to do what I can. You know.
Amy, going back to your answer to one of the previous questions, you were talking about, you shouldn't have to have Black Lives Matter necessarily or a slogan, people should care. So in answer to that question, how do you make people care?
I mean, not to get too philosophical, but I think I think that when you try to fragment all of the problems, you might be missing that there's one core problem that, if solved, would solve all of the ancillary problems. And changing people's frame of mind and how they view otherness in general would make it so that they wouldn't see a separation between themselves and a tree or themselves and a starving person.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, if people were instilled with the responsibility that each individual has their own role to play in saving the universe, then they would find within themselves what they were born to do and possibly execute that so well that even if they didn't donate money to a cause or directly put food in a child's mouth, whatever they have done has helped to inspire people and helped to keep things moving forward so that all of the problems would be solved.
I think that's so,
So well
and the
put.
way you
Yeah.
behave every day. I'm seeing what I think the shift that I notice amongst my kids' generation, as it were, and I still believe in putting pressure on governments, and I still believe in charity deeply, but my kids are more and more asking, what can I actually do, and I'm obsessed by pensions. We should all have sustainable pensions. It's ridiculous that your biggest chunk of money, you don't care where it's invested. But again, that's the consumer revolution I was talking about, that actually in our daily lives, make sure that every single choice we make is one which we really believe in. And that is, not to disconnect your life from your beliefs. I think that's going to be important.
I think we have time for another. I saw a hand up over there. Are you sure? All there?
I was going to ask a question, and that was, do you think with all the publicity you're getting from this, that other cities might be interested in doing a similar thing?
To talk to your mayors.
There's only one London Design Biennale.
He's not willing to franchise.
There are imitation's the best form of flattery.
We have talked about COP, actually.
So
Okay.
COP26 in Glasgow, and Richard's spot on. We've got a chance hosting COP26, a few hundred miles away, to make really big change, and we're talking to other cities about what we can do to put pressure on the UN. If you think back to 2005, Richard, Make Poverty History. So what a number of citizens around the G7 countries did, orchestrated and organised by people on this stage, was to get people power, to put pressure on governments, Make Poverty History, the concert and so forth. And so there are a number of us speaking, city to city, leaders to leaders, civic society, great organisers, about what we can do in advance of Glasgow in November this year, because we do need to change the opinions of governments if they're going to bring along seismic change. And the thing about this virus is, it's reminded us about the interconnectivity of humans around the globe. So we can talk about migration and how we're linked, and about climate change and rising waters and how we're linked and so forth. The virus is amongst us now. And so if we can't change the opinions of governments now, begs the question, when can we? And so this people power stuff that we're just talking about is really, really important. And this thing, asked about empathy. Put yourselves in the shoes of others is so important. But we can't rely upon altruism. There's got to be, I think, some self-interest as well, having skin in the game, and that's where the virus helps us this year in terms of it's horrible phrase to use in relation to an awful virus, but the sense of empathy. And so, but Ruth, who works in the second best city in Europe, Paris, you probably better not comment on that one either. But yes, we are talking to friends with us, Anne in Paris, Ada in Barcelona, Andy in Manchester, and so forth and so forth.
It is one of the things I love about the goals. I remember when Obama spoke about them in 2015, he said the first thing I got to do is put them into action here in the United States. And I do think that that's the thing which distinguishes them from the Millennium Development Goals, that they accept that responsibility for change lies both in your own country and abroad. We moved away from a model where it's just us, them, rich, poor, but taking responsibility for your own country and creating community with others.
And just finally, to our panel before you go, what, apart from the Biennale, of course, what other cultural art experiences are you looking forward to enjoying in London over the summer? Richard, start with you.
I'm going to see a play for the first time on Tuesday,
Great.
which I strongly recommend not having seen it, because a friend of mine's in it. It's called Walden. I believe it's excellent.
Okay, enjoy. Innie?
Do you still have field day? That's super fun. Love to do that.
Ez?
There is an exhibition at the Dulwich Picture Gallery on plants.
Okay.
It's just opened. Everyone says it's great. So I haven't had time, but I can't wait.
Sadiq?
Getting to see indoors the Biennale, of course, would be great. On message, Ben. On message. We're doing open air cinemas showing great films like Love Actually and Notting Hill.
Oh, not again.
Can I be in your next film, Richard?
He's semi-retired.
Natural History Museum is doing Fantastic Beasts, really good. I think the V&A are doing an exhibition on Iran. I can't wait to get back out there. Let's do London this summer.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
So, what happens next after today? Well, as we collect your voices and people's demands for change here at the Forest over the next few weeks, we'll be bringing them online in an interactive experience thanks to a partnership with Google Arts and Culture. Using augmented reality technology, you will be able to project the global goal pillar of your choice into your own environment wherever you are. Share it on social media with the change you want to see. This will be available to anyone, anywhere, in particular those people who aren't fortunate enough to come here to Somerset House this month. One thing you can do now, though, is download the Google Arts and Culture app on your phones and open the Project Everyone page. We will have a couple of people from Google hovering by the 17th pillar to explain how it works and answer any questions you may have. After the conversation we've had today, it's clear that design, art and culture have a huge impact on changing the world and on helping us to recover after this pandemic. But if all you have is a voice, you have a means to make that change. Everyone here has a megaphone in the form of social media, so please do help to play a role in making the global goals happen. Record your short message at the 17th pillar, articulating the change you want to see. Take a photograph, share it on social media, use the hashtags Forest for Change or at the Global Goals, and tell everyone you know to come along and experience it and do the same too. All that's left for me to say is a thank you to our panel and thank you for coming along. Enjoy the rest of your evening.